Hi, everybody. My name's David Lang. I'm here at Open ROV headquarters, and I'm really excited today to talk to one of my
Uh-oh,
big
you cut out.
heroes. Can't hear it anymore?
Hmm.
Is that not working?
Yep.
All right, good. So I'm really excited today to talk to one of my big heroes, Laura James. And Laura, you are up in Seattle, is that right?
Yes, I'm up in Seattle. It's a beautiful sunny day up here too.
So I have to ask, how do you self-identify as a diver, as a videographer, as a citizen scientist? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you self-identify as a diver, as a citizen scientist, a videographer? What do you say your title is?
That one's really hard. I've been kind of thinking about that a lot lately, and I mean, first and foremost, I would say an advocate for Puget Sound or an advocate for our waters because
Yeah.
I am I don't fall into any of the categories specifically. Um, yeah.
So are
And
you
occasionally my dog will bark.
that's fine, no problem. So do you have any
Now
formal
you're
training?
delayed. Weird.
Okay.
Can't hear you.
It's still not working?
It's cutting in and out.
Let me just take the headphones out. Maybe that's the problem. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, we'll try this. Um, so do you have any formal science training, or is this how did you fall in love with the water? How did it happen? What's the timeline?
Um, so I got certified in 1990, so that makes me having been diving for a long, long time.
Yeah.
I have always been, well, the water's always kind of been a part of my world. I grew up here in Seattle in the Northwest, and so um, I was in college, and my significant other at the time was a diver.
Yeah.
And he went for a dive with his buddies. They went for a crab dive up at Mukilteo.
Mhm.
And I sat on the beach, and they came out of the water ear to ear grinning. And this guy was a pretty stoic character. And so um, I thought, if diving makes him that happy, I gotta get a piece of this. Gotta
Yeah.
get a piece of this action.
Right.
So I got certified, and I was a pre-med major in college with a heavy leaning towards physics.
Hmm.
And my actual interest was kind of neurophysiology. And
Hmm.
so if there had been that degree available when I was in college, which like literally the year after I graduated or so, that became a degree option at the UW.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that would have been nice.
Right.
But
Right.
I then started diving and ended up with competing interests, college and diving. I opened a dive shop in around 91, 92, and got very interested in deep shipwreck diving,
Hmm.
and actually took some time off from college because you kind of can't be a crazy deep shipwreck diver and a full-time student at the same time. At
So
least
you
not the way I was doing it.
so you opened a
Uh-oh,
dive
I can't
shop.
hear you.
So can you hear me now? Better? Sorry, I don't know
No.
what the
Oh,
problem is.
there you are.
Okay, weird. I don't know what the issue is. So you opened a dive shop while you were in college, and you were doing
Yeah.
direct diving.
Yeah, I had this crazy idea that I could do a better job than the shop that trained me. I,
Hmm.
I was kind of I had uh, a lot more bravado and
Mhm.
maybe not as many brains.
Yeah, I know about
and
that.
so yeah, I opened a shop, and it was a little niche market store. We specialized in deep shipwreck diving, and we were the first mixed gas dive shop north of California, Northern California. So we were the first nitrox trimix training facility. There's a guy wing stocks down in California, but we were it. We were kind of, we had the corner on the crazy market.
So that's interesting. So had you so kind of fast forwarding a little bit, did you tell me the story of what happened with sea star wasting syndrome because that's
Um,
how I came to know about you.
yeah. So, uh, I I would probably say 5 or 6 years ago, I really got into studying the environment and environmental impact of stuff on Puget Sound, and I got involved in stormwater education, and I was shooting video of storm drains flowing into Puget Sound, and so I was already becoming very aware of like baseline surveys, and so I have noticed change in Puget Sound since I started diving. There's been biodiversity shift. There's been what appears to me less diversity and less marine life in areas that I've been diving now for 25 years. And so I maybe pay a little bit more attention than the average bear when it comes to the environment. I kind of try to, I call it kind of mindful diving, you know, like I look and I really try to experience it. We heard about the sea star wasting disease going on up in Canada, and I just kind of thought that it was probably a localized issue with their sewer outflow, or I don't know what. I was like, yeah, yeah, that's their problem.
Hmm.
And I really honestly didn't think that much of it. And then because of my endeavors in the environmental stuff, I kind of have this great network of friends and extended friends and internet friends who report stuff to me, like anything weird, anything underwater, they report it. They send me pictures. Everyone's got my text and email and Facebook. And one of my good friends, who was actually, strangely enough, knew me in college,
Hmm.
texted me a picture of a wash up that was occurring probably about 3 miles from my house. We both live in West Seattle. And all of these sun stars, which are the solasters, had washed up on the beach, like hundreds of them, in unprecedented event. I talked to the old people along the shoreline to see, you know, is this just a cyclic thing? Has this happened before? And we talked to people who'd been out there, who'd lived there for 50 plus 60 years, and this is the first time they'd ever seen anything like that. So I thought, you know, uh-oh, this is a big problem. And almost at the exact same time, um, other people started noting it. I'd actually called up the Seattle Aquarium and texted my biologist friend over there and said, do you want me to get samples? This is really weird. And
Hmm.
they weren't super interested. They were like, meh. I'm like, I was going to pile them all into a big garbage pail and take them over and set them there, because I was like, this is something bad.
Right.
And so so then within a week, or within less than a week, we actually started getting underwater kind of, we started seeing the sun stars dying, the sunflower stars dying. And I got out, and my dive buddy and I went, like literally 2 days after we saw the wash up with the sun stars, the solasters, we went out to a really heavily dove site where everyone does their training, and that's where I shot the very compelling video of the purple starfish falling off of the pilings and the dead bodies. And the big thing with the sea star wasting syndrome is that it peaked in the media and then it died off. And then you'd
Right.
hear something and it died off.
Right.
And that's what kind of goaded me into real action, because I just felt like what we were, this was, as I said in the one video for PBS, I thought this is the change of my lifetime, because I immediately recognized that there was going to be something wrong. I follow the newspaper, and my dad cuts me out newspaper articles. I could even show them to you. It's very cute, like paper. And August or so the year before last, I think it was, sometime like ages ago now, he cut out this article about this local professor, Dr. Payne, who is an ecologist, and he's like the granddaddy of ecology.
Mhm.
And he did the just like the penultimate work on keystone species. He's the guy who like coined the term keystone species, and he's right here in Seattle. And he got this, like, I mean, he's in his 80s now, or probably late 70s, and he got this award from Japan for for his work on keystone species, and they wrote it up in the Times, in Seattle Times, and he won like $200,000 or something. And the
Right.
article fascinated me because it talked about Pizester ocraceus, which is the purple sea star, and talked about his research where before he did his research, ecologists just kind of sat there and watched what happened. And that was really boring. And he decided that he was going to move stuff and see what happens if you remove something from the food web. And what he found out was that keystone species, the purple sea star, if you remove it from the food web, you have a massive dramatic impact that is unlike, it's unprecedented. You'd never guess that a sea star would have that much of an impact when it was removed, because when you removed it from the seashore, he did all his work out at Tatoosh Island. When you remove it from the system, all of a sudden mussels move in, and the mussels take over the beach and they choke out biodiversity. And it turns out that sea stars are kind of messy eaters, and so when they're gobbling up barnacles and mollusks, they kind of, food goes everywhere, and then other things eat that food, so you get more anemones and sponges and fish, and sea stars really bring life, essentially. And so I'd read that article, and I file everything away in the back of my noggin, and so when I saw all of these sea stars dying, I immediately thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? And so to me, it wasn't just the fact that sea stars were dying, it's that I had this kind of mild background, having read this story and got very interested in keystone species sometime before.
Can I go back to something? So you had mentioned a little bit. You said there was media coverage about the issue, and then it kind of went away, and that was something that spurred you to action because you thought something that was ongoing.
Yeah, well, so I've been kind of working with the media and local news stations and KCTS9 and PBS now for 4 or 5 years with regards to storytelling, to get almost as if I'm a science communicator and helping push stories out to the general public in a way that can be consumed. And this felt like something that should be noticed and paid attention to, and the fact that it was just doing these little like flashes in the pan bothered me. And so I knew that I could get compelling footage, and if I could get compelling footage, it wouldn't die. Because the big thing is there were photographs of like, here's pre and here's post, and as soon as I got out there and saw the stars like just kind of hanging and dying, I thought, this is money. I mean, I literally, in my head, that's what I thought. I thought, this is amazing. I can't believe my good fortune to actually capture this event as it's happening. And I'm like, this is like I've just been given a gift, and I am the voice of this in a way. I mean, it sounds kind of arrogant, but
right. So one of the things, and so
oh, you're cutting in and out.
Is that better? I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me now?
Back. Yep.
Okay. I don't know what's going on.
Oh well.
So one of the things that surprised me about this story is when I first heard about it, I heard about it at the same time that I heard about this citizen science initiative to kind of monitor and snap photos and do all these things. That's something that you were involved with, or something that you got involved with, or what was the...
Okay, so that one's interesting. The Marine Intertidal Network had been doing had been documenting. They had a site, and then the Vancouver Aquarium had a monitoring site. And the problem was the sites, I'll be honest, were very, very cumbersome. And to do data entry, they wanted full-on protocol. And they had moderately reasonable success, but all the people I noticed that were reporting were all scientists, they were all researchers, they were all students, and they weren't getting, there was no data for our area. And I'm like sitting here looking at dead sea stars, but you don't see like sea stars dying. And so I'd already been paying attention to kind of using social and things like that to reach out and connect to the general public. I went to this fantastic, I go to these science talks. They're like local, like the Seattle Science Center puts them on. They're like I don't know, like beer and science kind of thing. And
Sure.
this one lady, Stephanie Zimmerman, had given a talk on crowdsourcing for science.
Hmm.
And I already knew about literati, which is his mission is to make a litter-free planet by having people take a picture and Instagram and hashtag literati when they pick up some trash in their wherever they are. And
Hmm.
what he did with that is he made a heat map
Hmm.
of the trash, which you could then take to your municipality and push for change. Do you need more garbage pails? Do you need more frequent pickup?
Hmm.
What's going on? Why is this place why is it a litter bug? Who's
Right.
littering and why?
Right.
And so that gave me the idea, and then Stephanie Zimmerman's presentation, I can send it to you. It's absolutely fascinating. It goes into Zooniverse and old weather and all of these just super cool ideas to crowdsource for science.
Yeah, I love it.
And I thought I can harness this because
Mhm.
no one's really harnessing it. And so I talked a lot to the scientists because scientists are very touchy about citizen scientists because we mess up their protocols or we get great ideas and we go out and do something that's cool, but they can't use the information. They're like,
Mhm.
yeah, it would have been nice if you talked to us.
Mhm.
We can't use any of this. And
Right.
so what I decided to do was make something with my dive buddy, because I'm not that good at hacking at all. My dive buddy's a hacker. Um, Put together an early warning system so that the general public could be roped into helping us, because the general public was interested. Part of why the story didn't pick up steam is because the public couldn't be involved, and so the other thing I wanted to do was figure out a way to give this thing legs, and one way to do that is get the public involved. It's kind of like a campaign, if you will. It's kind of like the Obama campaign with the $4 one-touch donation. In my mind, it's something super simple that the masses can do that makes them feel connected to something bigger.
Mhm.
And so by making hashtag Six Starfish, we made a little web page and I pushed it out to the media, to anyone who would listen, and we put it in the Starfish story on NewsHour,
Mhm.
PBS NewsHour. Um, Instead of having to do this big cumbersome protocol, people could just go hashtag Six Starfish, and it seemed kind of fun. Um,
Right.
and so that got. I wouldn't say that we had astonishing results and masses of participation, but it really gave the story legs, because
Yeah.
here we were doing something that involved the general public, that let them feel connected, and we actually it did work. We actually found out about the wasting disease hitting the Oregon coast before the scientists saw it. We actually had beach watchers down there who reported it a couple weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the actual scientists got out and did their survey. So in in theory it worked, and in practice it actually worked.
Okay.
And the scientist, Pete Raimondi, I believe he used some of the data. So what I really wanted to do was put together a system where we could, in real time, it's exportable, the XMLs are exportable, that they can build a three-dimensional heat map of a disease or the spread of something, um, based on, the public's eyeballs, because we need more eyeballs out there, just like OpenROV. It puts democratizes science.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that I love that story, and there's so many things that I personally am going to take away from all of that stuff you said. I think there are a lot of lessons. Um, one what so now they figured out about the starfish that it was a virus, wasn't it?
Yeah, they haven't actually figured out why, though. They know that the virus is there and causing genetic changes in the sick ones, but we still don't have a real reason.
Okay, so the story continues. I mean,
Yeah.
this is under
Um,
ongoing.
uh-oh, you're cutting in and out again.
Is
Beep,
better?
beep, beep, tap, tap. It'll come
Better?
back. Hmm. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, there you're back.
All right. Cool. So the story is ongoing.
Oh
It's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah, totally.
And
And we're
you're
seeing the biodiversity shift that Dr. Payne predicted.
wow.
So we're seeing real changes at dive sites. Like animals are changing. Pilings where there used to be lots of biodiversity are now barren. And areas where there haven't been green sea urchins in years are getting piles of adult sea urchins. So they're moving in from somewhere. They're coming in because of the lack of predation from the sea stars.
And you're that's something you're doing now is you're doing kind of is it called Urchin Watch or what is it called?
Well, it's still part of Six Sea Star because they're potentially going to get the wasting disease too. So I tried to keep it super simple, and it's just like if you notice something that has to do with the sea stars, hashtag it Six Starfish and write in the comments what you saw. I mean, it's stupid simple. It's just like,
Great. So, but it is one of the what I'm really curious about is that it is something that's ongoing. So it's not something where
absolutely. Oh
they
yeah,
they figured
totally.
out the virus. So the
Yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. And so that's what we're gonna do with the kid groups with the open ROV is I'm gonna enlist everyone with now there's probably I would guess I don't know for sure a dozen or so open ROVs up here and try to get everyone to continue surveying and rope them all into helping. Um, because the one thing we don't have right now is any deep water information,
Mhm.
and so purple starfish there's everything has cycles. And
Mhm.
so the purple starfish move up to shallow water and down to deep water depending on the season. And so now we're seeing some bigger stars and they wouldn't have grown from plankton size to adult sea star size in, a year or 8 months. So they're coming from somewhere.
Huh.
And so the question is where, and we don't have because the scientific divers all stopped at about 80 feet because of restrictions and regulations.
Mhm.
Um, we don't have deep water information. We don't have 100 to 200 foot. Like, what's going on with the stars way down there? So,
Ah,
what is our breeding stock?
wow, interesting. And so that's where you're using the ROVs, and
Yeah.
you said you're doing this with students.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So, I targeted inner city schools or underserved communities, and so these after school programs for STEM learning and the ALIA program down in Burien, which are all these kind of they're college prep for the rest of us.
Okay.
Try to give kids who may not have had such a good chance to go to like Seattle Prep or somewhere, but give them skills they need to get into college and good jobs in the future in science and technology. And so the two places I was really lucky to hook up with the Technology Access Foundation and the Environmental Science Center, and both of them just leapt on board. And the technology TAF, the Technology Access Foundation, they actually have a Lego Mindstorm lab that was donated, I believe, by the Gates Foundation. And so they have two high schools, inner city high schools, very diverse population of students. Um, and it's part of their STEM training. And so again, this is this kind of college prep for inner city kids who don't have a lot of options. And they've got a little lake right next to their a pond lake, Hickland Lake, right next to their educational facility, which is a King County facility. Um, and so I was trying to think of ways, how do you get kids outside and doing something hands-on, and um, just one thing led to another. I was already doing some environmental work with the Friends of Hickland Lake, which was this curmudgeon-y, dear-hearted, sweet old gentleman who passed away, and he had lived in White Center, which is kind of this area around Seattle, unincorporated King County, and when he was a kid, and when his kids were kids, they'd swam in this little lake. It was the local kid swimming pond,
Yeah.
and because of stormwater issues and changes, it got so polluted that it now has signs, and it's just disgusting. It's just crappy. And he actually got a grant, a $60,000 grant or so, to get these cool floating islands put in they're made in Scotland. This cool technology where you put these living islands of plants floating around. They're anchored, but their roots are supposed to, the rhizomes are supposed to pull all the nutrients out of the water and help clean it. Instead of using chemicals every couple of years to kill the cyanobacteria.
Right.
And but what we figured out was these islands, the lake is too polluted, and they didn't have enough money to put in a lot of islands. They were only able to put in a couple, and they needed like 4 or 5 because of its pollution levels and stormwater levels. And then the so they need aerators to help stir it up with oxygen in there because it's got the cyanobacteria, kills everything. And I got involved with it because when I used to work for Puget Soundkeeper Alliance, I had good insider information on how you navigate the Clean Water Act stuff. And they had applied for a grant from the Rose Foundation, which has this Puget Sound Mitigation Fund. And so if Puget Soundkeeper Alliance sues a big company like Burlington Northern or BNSF Railroad, and they get a for polluting, and they get $1 million, that goes into this remediation fund. But the remediation fund can only be spent on restoration projects and projects that impact Puget Sound from a Clean Water Act angle.
Wow.
And because this little stormwater pond didn't have any official outflows, it's a stormwater retention pond, no one could connect it to Puget Sound. So it wasn't really a Clean Water Act issue. And so everyone was just blowing it off. Well, I got some of the county people, friends involved. They were already involved, but they weren't really digging. And they went and dug and found me. I asked them, so where does the water go when it gets full? You know, because when it rains, all of this storm water goes flowing into it.
Right.
And so it turns out that the King County has big pumps, and they pump water out of it so that it doesn't overflow over everything into the stormwater system.
Oh my gosh.
So they're pumping nasty, disgusting, cyanobacteria-laden, polluted with tire rubber and hydrocarbons and PAHs. They're pumping that water into the stormwater system that then feeds out to right offshore from a place called Salmon Creek. So technically, King County is discharging polluted water into Puget Sound when it rains, indirectly, directly. So it becomes a Clean Water Act situation. And knowing what I know, I can then kind of, my hope was, well, Dick Turnow, who is the guy who started the Friends of Hicklin Lake, was to help him rewrite the grant that he'd written for, using that information and put them on the hook for this, and talk the county into giving some more money, get some more money from the Rose Foundation to put in more floating islands. And they, you know, they needed more money basically to do this, because they had a start. These are like, this was an amazing project, whatever, 5 or 8 years ago.
So
and then he passed away from cancer. So I'm doing all of this in his legacy kind of thing.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So
it seems
that. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Sorry about that. So it seems to me that there's a big overlap between. I don't like the term citizen science so much. Because I think.
Oh, you're cutting in and out.
Is that better? Let me know when you can hear me.
You'll come back. I'm patient.
Okay.
I think it's just an internet-y thing.
Yeah, the connection is really good here, so I'm not sure what the deal is. But
come back.
Back? No.
Yep. You're back.
Okay. So it seems to me that there's an overlap between what you're doing, and I hesitate to call it citizen science because I think it's bigger than that.
Uh-oh, you're out again.
Let me see if I've got something else going on. Is that better?
No. Yes. No.
What about now?
Uh-oh.
Now?
No. Oh, there you are.
Okay, shoot. So I was just saying there's an overlap between citizen science and it's almost civic science, where you guys are getting this information and actually taking action in your community.
Yes, and that's that. So that to me is very important. One thing that frustrates me is when you get all of this great information and you can't do anything with it and you just sit on it. Like
Yeah.
you just sit there and you have nothing happens.
Mhm.
And so I've always been very kind of action oriented, and I think that's also how you get the public involved. The big problem with getting the public involved in environmental activism is that they really don't see anything happening. And so they're like, yeah, I want to help the planet, but I do this and nothing happens.
Mhm.
And that's why I think that people don't get like really long-term involved. And for retention, you need people to feel like they're part of something.
Interesting. So this is Stuart Brand has written a lot about this idea of slow science, about this science that takes place over really long periods of time, and actually these different disparate forms of citizen science have actually done a fairly decent job of achieving that. I think what you're talking
Yes.
about, the participation, is a really interesting aspect of that.
Well, like birding, like the Audubon Society or amateur astronomy are
Mhm.
two huge examples where great things were pushed forward by citizen scientists.
Right, right, yeah, no doubt about it. And
And
so
yeah.
So I've written a little bit about that. I think there's a lot to learn from those two disciplines.
Yes.
Um, do you, what is your vision for the future of citizen science? Like, where do you think this is going?
I think that citizen science is going to be the way that we empower the general public to basically fix the problems that are too big for the government organizations and the nonprofits. Um, our biggest problem, like say for Puget Sound right now, is the stormwater runoff. But there is absolutely no way that we can fix that problem without the without personal actions by the general public. And again, this whole concept of giving them a reason to be involved and making them feel like their actions count by involving the general public in many multiple ways. I mean, not everyone's going to need to be a citizen scientist, but once they start seeing that the impact, the change that the general public can incur, um, I think that the grassroots approach is going to be key to basically everything. We need to pull it back, become hyper local, be really interested in our own backyards, and be it people and I'm not going to tell everyone they need to be interested in Puget Sound. If they don't like water, I don't care. I just want them curious and interested in something. And
Mhm.
give citizen science gives the general populace that science has become inaccessible for too many people if they maybe don't have a science degree, or you know they didn't know it was an option, or they got some other fancy degree and they just didn't get a chance to chase whatever, they get curious. They weren't able to follow their curiosity because they were supposed to go make money and babies and stuff. And citizen science makes it okay to not know everything and to be curious and um, to follow your curiosity and learn. And learning, I just think it's a great avenue for people to this adult learning, or even not adult, college, high school, for people to follow their curiosity. And but it makes it okay to not know the answer. And
Ah,
I guess is the big thing for me. It's like to learn on the go, like just in time learning. I'm interested in ecology, and like I give a presentation now called The Accidental Ecologist. And and I talk about how the sea star wasting syndrome, I became fascinated by ecology. I was not an ecologist prior. But then I read this article about Dr. Payne, and sea star wasting disease happened, and I went and I email with him all the time now, and I went down to his office and we chatted for like hours. And I've sat in on discussions between the preeminent scientist on ecology, Dr. Payne, the godfather of ecology, and his star student Drew Harvell, who is the Cornell researcher who has been was the researcher for sea star wasting syndrome, and I got to hear them discuss whether or not this is going to cause extinction in a species. I
Hmm.
mean, I get to listen to that, and she was worried that it was, and he's like, no, species are resilient, and now, 8 months later, she's no longer using the word extinction, and he's happy about it, and you know these just amazing discussions that I get involved in because of the initial. I built the trust of the scientists so that I got let into their world a little bit,
Right.
and that's key as well. Is this kind of collaboration between science and non-science, and that's something I kind of wanted to touch on. Is that and building the trust and letting go of your ego is really key because I'm really smart in some areas, um, but that doesn't mean I know everything. And just like the scientists can be really smart in their areas and
Mhm.
maybe not know how to reach the public so well or do a
Mhm.
campaign.
Mhm.
And one of the neat things about the sea star wasting syndrome is now we've got the Emergency Disease Marine Act. Actually, I think it's in the House right now, but a Congressman Heck actually saw the story and was like, how did we not have enough money to study this appropriately? And he wrote a bill to set aside $12 million a year for emergency marine diseases in the future that are coming from us. Like the next time sea star wasting disease, if this becomes the law, then all of a sudden, and it's got everything written into it. I'll send you a link to it, but it's got everything written into it for like an emergency preparedness, like a task force and a committee that will mobilize within X number of days, and that would have been super helpful because
Will that
so much
involve
of the
citizen
data
scientists?
that we got was from uh you'll come back in a second.
Okay,
Oh,
keep
there you're
going.
back. You're back.
Will
um
that emergency marine disease, will that involve citizen
yeah.
scientists as well?
Uh-oh. What?
Never mind.
I got the start of that.
Well,
What
will
do you
that
want to know?
involve citizen science? Will that have a place for citizen scientists?
Um, I hope so. It's not specifically listed as that, but part of the task force is figuring out how to utilize resources.
Mhm.
And if the same people who were involved in the sea star wasting syndrome, then yes. So back to the original that discussion. So the scientists put together a beautiful protocol. It was just really a lot of stuff in it. There was like, you had to be able to tell the grade of disease and the size of the sea star, and you had to do a 50-foot, and you had to know whether 5% had grade 1 and 15% had grade 2. And so for the general public, that's a lot like work. And
Mhm.
they're not as intrigued by that kind of stuff. And so that's why the scientific protocol wasn't quite so popular in the general public. And so what I'm hoping is that as it becomes clear that there is this space for crowdsourcing in science, that we think of more creative methods of doing that to get the general public like involved, if that makes sense.
Me
Um,
too.
yeah. Yeah. So that's sea star wasting syndrome in a big ass nutshell.
Well, I mean, this is so, I could sit here and talk to you for probably the whole day, and I think we should do that at some point. But I want to end this one now, just so we have like a bite-sized kind of hour that people can watch if
Yeah,
they want to catch up. And then we'll see what questions emerge, and maybe we can have more specific follow-up discussions around some of the more.
yeah. I mean, the really amazing thing is that just like the take home is that individual action can have such a big impact. Like the fact that I got interested, went out, shot some video. Katie Campbell and PBS made a story that caught some congressman's eye,
Mhm.
and he wrote a bill, and now it's we're gonna have we're gonna campaign for it, where I'm gonna try to get a flash mob of people to put on purple T-shirts and stand in a giant star shape, and I don't know when and where, but I mean, giant star mob, and build support for this. We've got bipartisan and bicoastal support, and we just really, the fact that just public action, and we've got the kids. I mean, the whole reason they did this with the robot was to take these kids from Arkansas diving in the place where they did the fundraiser for. And so it can be, I think it's the most powerful thing because it helps create an activated, empowered public, and that is the best instrument of change that we've got going for us.
I love it. Cool. You're my hero. Thank you so much, and we'll do it again.
Sounds great. It was so
All
nice
right,
talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, Laura.